Buonasera a tutti, good evening and welcome to the Italian Radio Hour. Io sono Viviana and I would like to welcome back our regular listeners and also welcome any new listeners. Also be sure to like us on Instagram and Facebook at Italian Radio Hour and subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch up on any past video interviews. Vorrei dare il benvenuto ai nostri ascoltatori da tutto il mondo, grazie per essere con noi anche oggi mentre continuiamo il nostro viaggio per l'Italia e la cultura italiana. So are you ready to pack your bags and head to Venice? I'm definitely ready to do so in about a month. So we're going to treat you to a two-part interview this week and next week, where we're going to bring you people that you definitely want to connect with while you are discovering the city of Bridges. And today we'll talk and have a nice conversation with food blogger and food critic and guide extraordinaire, Monica Cesarato, who has a wonderful tour that will take you to those little places where you can get the best cichetti, aka little Venetian style finger foods. And next week, we will be talking to the Atombi brothers, master designers in the lamp beads work. But prima, pubblicità. Parli italiano? Do you want to learn, master, or improve your Italian? Istituto Mondo Italiano can help. Located in the heart of Regent Square, Mondo Italiano offers small group classes and one-on-one private tutoring to help you learn Italian in no time. Visit us online at www.istitutomondoitaliano.org. Un caffè, per favore. My first cup of coffee sets the tone for my entire day, and I get my coffee at La Prima Espresso. La Prima has been brewing Pittsburgh's best coffee for nearly 35 years. Try any of their in-house roasted varieties of beans from all over the world at home, or come and enjoy an espresso or a cappuccino at any of their locations, where their friendly baristas and familiar faces will make you feel at home. Because a trip to La Prima is like a little trip to Italy, only closer to home. Well, finally, the wait is over, and Monica, benvenuta al programma. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here speaking to you. And hello, everybody.
Yes, I heard great things about you, my dear friend Kadi and her husband Tony were just in Venice and got on your Andar per bacari tour. And so again, I'm counting the days until you and I can connect really face to face.
Thank you. Yeah, looking forward to seeing you in real life.
So, Monica, to introduce you to our audience, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself? And are you a true Venetian, so to speak? And tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, let's define true Venetian.
I don't know.
Okay, so I'm not born in Venice and I don't actually live in the city of Venice as such, but I live about 5 kilometers. And I literally live there because I'm there 7 days a week for work. So I am what we call, and also Venice is not just the city of Venice, Venice is the province. So I'm actually in the province, as I say, about 5 kilometers.
You're definitely more
I'm a Venetian. I'm a Venetian. I'm defined myself as a Venetian, and most of the people do. I'm a food blogger, as you say. I'm a cooking instructor. I'm a food tour guide. I write about food, and I just wrote a book about it, about cichetti. I am a social media manager as well. I'm a podcaster as well, like you. And and I do websites as well.
Okay, so you're a jack of all trades.
Yes, well, as I always say, I got loads of debts to pay, so I need to do lots of jobs.
I think one leads to another. So, yeah. Well, let's talk about the beautiful city of Venice. For those that might not have been there, can you tell us? Obviously, from an aerial view, looks a little bit like a fish. I think that's kind of a common place. But can you tell us a little bit how it is divided districts or points of reference that people might have in mind?
So Venice is not an island, is a series of islands. Okay, they are connected to each other by bridges. It is just a little bit of historic background. It's one of the oldest republics in the history of the world. It's a country, because it wasn't just a city, it's a country that lasted for over 1600 years and expanded at its maximum all the way to Milan, all the way to Austria, all the way to Trieste, all what we now know as the ex-Yugoslavia coast, Macedonia, Albania, Greece, some parts of Greece, some parts of Turkey, and the island of Cyprus, were for many, many, many years, centuries, under the control of Venice. So now it's only a little city, but back in the days, it was a big power. Okay. So it's a city built on water in the middle of a Venetian lagoon, so salt water. It's divided in 6 major districts of the areas. The districts are called sestiere, from number 6, that means 6 in Venetian. And there are the 6 districts, and the 2 most residential ones are Cannaregio and Castello. They are the ones where, in my opinion, if you want to stay away from the crowds, are the best places to stay. And then you have the most concentrated with the crowds and with monuments that are San Marco, Dorsoduro, and Santa Croce. And then which one I'm missing? Hold on. Oh, and San Polo. Okay, those are the main ones. Okay, then obviously you go the island of the Giudecca, then you have Murano, Burano, but they are detached, even though they are still considered, they are part of Venice. Okay, and in Venice, you walk. So yes, it's true, you can take a gondola, but I do recommend to take, because it's one in a lifetime experience to do. You can take the water buses going everywhere, but to be honest with you, Venice is only 3 square kilometers, so you can walk everywhere. There are more than 400 bridges. I agree, that's a bit tiring, but you can walk everywhere.
Well, as long as you don't do like I do, that I get on some sort of path and then it takes me nowhere but water. But anyway,
that's the beauty of Venice, isn't it? It's the beauty of Venice to do that.
I always wonder, how people move in and out of their apartments. You see police on water, you see.
Oh yeah.
Food supplies,
firemen, ambulance, policemen, your wine, your food, and the old lady that go around with a little trolley when they go do the shopping every day, and they cart a little trolley up to 4 stairs of up to the apartments, because most of Venetians' homes do not have lifts.
So now we are indeed in the beginning of the summer, probably the peak season, even though I don't think Venice has a slow season.
Not anymore. We used to until I think let's say 2017. There used to be a clear difference between the winter months, so November, December, January, and then people starting to come back maybe in February with the carnival. Then you had another little break, and then the season will start with Easter all the way to October. But in the last few years, taking away the years of the COVID, of course, but let's say 2018, 2019, and from last year, non-stop. This year, we haven't had one moment break. And I got to say, that is actually not good, because people say to me, it's good because you work all the time. Not necessarily, because you do need a break. Venetians themselves need a break from the tourists to have a city back to themselves for at least 1 month, 2 months, to be able to take the hordes of people that come in. But when you have people constantly, it wears you down. It really wears you down. So please only come in summer. No, I never say to come in summer. I say to people, what they should do is to stop being tourists and try to be travelers. As in, don't come just with your body, but come with your soul, and stay in Venice for at least 5 to 7 days. You will not regret it. You will not regret it.
I was my last time in Venice was just a few years ago, and again I have my ticket for less than a month, and it was finally a childhood dream come true, coming for the Carnevale. And I was with my sister and my nephew, and we stayed for a few days, and it was from Rome we took the train. And I came out to the train station. You hear about the Carnevale di Venezia, you see, the telegiornali, the news pictures and everything. And I come out of the station, I couldn't see a single mask. And I was like, yep. And then as soon as I crossed the bridge.
Which year was it?
6 years ago. And then as soon as I crossed the bridge, one mask after another. And it was just a parade that I continued 24/7 for, the length of the Carnivale, and my eyes were filled with colors and just everything about it. I'm sure that, from a local standpoint, that might be a little tiring, but for us,
no, you know what it is? It's not tiring. Is the carnival is not anymore what it used to be. It is from the last 10 years, I would say, because I remember writing an article about this in 2010. So about 10 years, something like that. It has become only for tourists. You will not see very rarely any Venetian dressing up anymore.
Oh.
And to see this year, the only mask that you could see was only by going to Mark Square. Okay. And it's sad for me because I grew up with the big Venice Carnival where everybody from the countryside will turn up there. I think the problem is that now it's turned into an event for the elite and for, showing off those beautiful costumes. But the Venice Carnival wasn't about that. The Venice Carnival was a bit like Halloween. So you just make up your costumes with what you had at home, okay? And you just went there and you had a great time. You were dancing in the campos, you were drinking and singing and whatever. Unfortunately, the last 10-15 years, they took away that they say for security reason, but whatever. And so now the parties are only in the big palaces. Don't get me wrong, I've been to those, lovely, but that is not the carnival.
A different type of experience.
It's a different type of experience. And it's actually not the heart of a carnival, the soul of a carnival, because carnival was born over 1,000 years ago. And it was the only time in Venice when the different social classes were able to talk and meet to each other because they were hiding behind masks.
The masks, right.
So the idea that we have of a carnival now with a Renaissance costume is the carnival of a 1700 that, to be honest with you, it was the end of a carnival, because for many years in the 1800s, the carnival wasn't celebrated because of Napoleon and the Austrians. They didn't allow to do it. And it was only revived in the 70s. So it's not really the real carnival. You want to see the real carnival? You go to Burano.
I was going to say, where would you recommend someone to go?
The island of Burano. I know for a fact that they're still celebrating the way we used to. And so, the only trouble is if I'm telling now to people to go.
No, everyone is going to go. Please erase that. We didn't say
it is that. Because the moment you tell somebody, oh, you should go and see the real something, then it's not real anymore. Unfortunately, that's the problem with tourism.
So we talked about the masks, we talked about the gondola, and then some crooked bell towers, and the seagulls in San Marco and the Alto. And you mentioned a little bit about the Venetians. So if we were to describe the soul of a Venetian, it's like, I know we can't really generalize. And
no. It's because it's really funny because you ask from somebody from the mainland that usually the people from the mainland are really hated by the Venetians. They call us, from the terra, actually, we don't even say from the terraferma, they say from the countryside, dalla campagna. They really, very derogative. Okay, Venetians can be very funny. They can be as horrible to people as they want to be, but at the same time, if you do go on their good side, they will be your friends forever and they will do everything for you. So they always complain. That is one characteristic of Venetian people. Okay. They always complain. Even when things are good, they will always find something to complain. But then they come from a long tradition of being merchants. Merchants always complain, don't they?
I complain that it's all part of like haggle for prices. So maybe you're talking about the merchandise not be good, so that you can lower the price.
So it's in the DNA, okay. But apart from that, they are very resilient people. Okay, very resilient people, because just look what happened in 2019 with the Acqua Alta. They didn't ask help to anybody. They just rolled their sleeves up and got on with it. Same during the pandemic. Venice was totally cut off because, of course, this is a city that has less than 50,000 people living there. But over 250,000 people per day in tourists. And all of a sudden you take away that, you have a deserted city.
Yeah.
That's not working either because people weren't working. So, but they come through anyway. So very resilient people. As I said, they are islands people. So, people from islands tend to be a bit quirky sometimes. So all islands in the world, I think is being surrounded by all the water, but they're lovely. And big difference between the people from the center, from the historic center, and the people from the various islands, Murano, Burano, Pelestrina, Lido. Totally different. It's really funny, and it's really funny because they don't like each other. So it's a bit like in Florence, they have a different contrade and so on. So same kind of Siena, same kind of things. Italy is a small, as we say in Italian, l'Italia è un paese piccolo. Tutto il mondo è paese.
So I was wondering also, are there a lot of differences between the dialect and the cadence between the different regions of Venice as a province? And could you tell us something in dialects so that our listeners can hear the music?
Okay. So it's a big difference, for example, from the way we speak in Venice and from the way we speak here in the countryside. And there is also a difference within Venetians, they'll understand from which sestiere, from which island they come. Just to show you, it's just little differences. For example, yesterday I was with people from Padova, and I was listening to them, and and in my head I was going, "Oh my God, they're so countryside." And I'm a countryside, It's just that sometimes we pronounce things in a different way, with I don't know. It's just maybe in the verbs. Generally, it's in the verbs that we use. For example, I don't know. I would say in Venetian, you would say te geri, you wear. In countryside, I say gerito.
Oh, mamma mia.
No, it's the same. It's just you put the pronoun, you cross the pronouns and stuff like that. So sometimes, or maybe if you go in the deep countryside, way in the sticks of a Venetian countryside, they use terms that are only used in the countryside, are very campagnoli, very countryside, and we'll go like, as soon as somebody open their mouth, we go like, oh my God, it's from the countryside. And also the way we use the mouth, the use of the mouth is much wider compared maybe to the way the Venetian speaks. But a Venetian from the countryside can have a conversation in Venetian to people in Venice. It's just they know straight away.
Little nuances,
just to give you an example, when I'm going around doing the tours, and all of a sudden I have your old Venetian lady crossing my path, if I speak to her in Venetian, within 2 seconds, she says to me, "Oh yeah, you're from the countryside." Like 2 words.
You're like
2 words. So yeah, it's the accent as well. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm sure you will correct mine many times throughout this conversation today. But when someone comes to Venice, one of the experiences that one should indeed enjoy and take time and also experience one place and another is the one of the cichetti. Okay, so now tell us a little bit about what cichetti are, how it is pronounced properly, and then we'll go from there. Okay.
So cichetti comes from the word cicum in Latin, that means small quantities, and they are the little bites to eat. A Venetian generally will take drinking a ombra. A ombra is your typical small glass of wine. It can be red or white wine. Okay, you don't get to choose the type of wine. You just get to pick the color, and then the person behind the bacaro, behind the Osteria, will just give you what he has, because it's local house wine, and every bacaro, every Osteria has got its own. So you don't get to choose. You just get to say, I want un'ombra di rosso or un'ombra di bianco, and that's it. Ombra, the legend goes, but it's only a legend, goes, and you find this all over the net, but it's fake news. So ombra, they say, comes from the fact the Venetian used to stand in St. Mark's Square underneath a church tower to sell the wine. To keep the wine cool, they used to stand with the stalls underneath the shade of a church tower. So they used to say, andiamo a bere all'ombra del campanile. Let's go and drink in the shade of a church tower, because they used to move the stalls with the shade of a church tower. As the years went by, languages usually get modified and so on, and it became andiamo a bere un'ombra, let's go and drink a shade. But this is not a true story. Because when I was doing research for the book, I find out that the first mention of ombra is way much later, way before the Venetian, way after the Venetian used to do this. And it relates to the fact that there used to be a professor in the city of Venice, and let's say was loved by all the Venetians, for obviously he loved this wine and all the Osterias used to know him. And he used to define the size of a glass as un'ombra di niente, a shade of nothing, because it literally is 1/8 of a liter. And when he died, in his honor, more or less, they all start using it as a unit of measurement. Okay, but it's very normal, even in Veneto. This thing is done not just in Venice, but also in the Veneto. This is because Venice wasn't just the hub from the spices and the trade of silk, but it was also he held the monopoly of the wine trade. So all the wines that used to come, the beautiful, fantastic, high quality and very expensive wines that used to come from the East arrived into Venice, and then Venice exported it to the West. But we were also producing wine in Venice itself and in the Veneto region. So of course, as you transport the wines, they had this osteria and they belonged to the Veneto people. So obviously the tradition was carried outside of the city of Venice. In the city of Venice, though, there was the reason why we drink so much wine and so many cichetti is because the Venetian had a problem. It's a city built on water, but it's a city built on salt water. We didn't have, because we now do, but we didn't have any fresh water in the city of Venice. So the Venetians had to find ways to get the fresh water into the city. One of the two ways was with the wells, that they are the big constructions that you see in the middle of the campus. But in Venice, we only have one square that we call piazza. The others are open spaces are called campo, from field in Venetian. So there were these large constructions that are only access point for water, but really the water is underneath in large cistern built underground, filled with clay and sand. Then there were cylinders that went down from the base of a beautiful base that you see down for about 2 to 3 meters that collected the water. The problem was that you needed one dead animal and you got contaminated water. So Venetians had to find a way to be able to drink water safely. They didn't invent anything new. This mixing water with alcohol was done for millennium, But the difference between the Venetians and the other people were the other civilization used water and wine, water and meat, water and beer when? If they had a drought, if they had a siege, if they had to go from A to B. Venetians were drinking water and wine all the time. So you were wondering why we got so many crookies? No, that's not the reason. The reason is because it subsides. But they would have had, they would have been drunk all the time. Because remember, this was done by, and we know this for sure because when they did some studies at the Arsenale, they actually found some records that clearly said that water and wine was drunk by everybody, including the children. Okay. But obviously, even though it was a small alcoholic level, still alcohol. So it was pretty normal for everybody to associate a small glass of wine with a small bite to eat because that soaked up the alcohol level in the bloodstream. Obviously, they were doing this throughout the day, stopping in different parts of town, so that way you didn't get the digestion going and you could carry on working. And that's how the tradition of going from one place to another, it kind of was born. Okay, then all of the osteria and so were controlled by guilds because Venice was built on guilds and association. And that's what made it such a powerful city, because it didn't matter what trade you had to have, you had to belong to a guild. And there was a guild that controlled the osterias, and there were all many different type of establishments.
And actually that was going to be my next question, because in your book you mentioned Osteria, Locanda, Taverna, Malbazia, Furatola, Bastion, Banderuola, San Marco, Magazine, Fritoline. Okay,
and they all disappeared. The only one left nowadays is the Osteria of Bacaro. Everything mentioned there is all gone now. Doesn't exist anymore.
By reading your book, it was actually interesting that the Osteria, the difference between what the Osteria was and what in Venetian the word albergo was.
Yes.
Nothing to do with people, the albergo.
No, and now it's totally changed. And again, Osteria now has totally changed. So albergo in the old days wasn't what we call our hotel. It was a storage place.
Including a couple of dead bodies from.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, don't give that away. Come on, it's part of the story. And, Osteria was a place where you will have food, you will have good wine, good food, and sometimes you even slept there. And what was particular about the Osteria was that the social classes, they will have all social classes there. So you will have a duke, a count, talking to a gondolier. But then when they went out, they didn't speak to each other anymore because they couldn't, because of the social classes. Now it's changing again, because now Osteria now could be a very cheap place, but it could be a very fancy place. I mean, in Italy, above all, at least in the Veneto, but I'm pretty sure the rest of Italy as well, it's really changed. Until about 15 years ago, there was a clear difference between an osteria, a trattoria, and a ristorante. And a pizzeria. A pizzeria was only pizza, of course. But Osteria will be a place where you only go for wine, and they generally just gave you some cheese and some cold cuts, salame, mortadella, and so on. A trattoria wasn't a much the wine, was about the food, and it was just daily menu. You didn't get to choose. What came on your plate came. The typical idea that we have of a place with a checked tablecloth. Okay. The wine usually was crap because it was always like, house wine, but the cheap kind of house wine. And then you had the ristorante that was your formal place. Now, this has disappeared altogether because you have ristoranti that can be horrible places. You have trattorie that got like a Michelin star, and osteria that sell food. So it's nowadays don't base yourself on the name, but
there were two other places that you mentioned. The one was the Malbazia. This was for a higher quality wine appreciation.
Yeah. It was you can only sell the wines that were coming from the east. From the Malvazia is actually a grape. It can be red or white. There's a big difference, for example, nowadays in the type of Malvasia from the north and the south of Italy. So if you heard about this wine and you drank it when you're in Sicily, when you're in Calabria, Campania, they tend to be very liquor-like, nearly sweet. They're not dessert, but nearly sweet. And when you swirl them, it's very oily, very heavy. When instead in the north of Italy, they're very crispy wine, above all the whites, very crispy, very dry. And the one from a Yugoslavian coast, from Greece, from Turkey, during the Middle Ages were the best wines you can drink in Europe at the time. And then he said the monopoly, because of course Venice had the monopoly of the Adriatic coast. So he had the monopoly of bringing over. And so they were charging a lot of money and a lot of taxes on it. So you could only sell them in these specific places for that reason, because I had to keep the control of the taxes and all. Yes. And those start to close down when Venice was taken over by first the French and then the Austrians, because of course by then Venice had lost the control of the wine trade. So they, there weren't any taxes to be made on top, and that's it.
And then on the opposite spectrum of the quality scale, you had the Magazzini, the Bastioni, where it was
the cheap, what all the low life, a cheap and wonderful, nearly vinegar kind of wine will be served. And one was only for food and one was only for wine. And that's interesting because most of the time these establishments used to be next door to each other. So they can, you can drink in one and then next door you go have something to eat and then you go back and, so, but it's very interesting. It's very interesting how many different types there were, and they just totally disappear now.
Yes. So now let's get into kind of the core of the conversation. We're going back to the cichetti. And I was wondering if, the tradition, as you explain, of a little bit of a sip of wine and something to eat, but in the way that we imagine them now, this tradition, was it always ongoing, or there was a revival of these foods? 30
Okay,
years
so
or so.
it's been a revival of the idea of a cichetti. So when I started doing my first tours in 2008, I remember there was nobody, literally nobody knew outside of a Venetian community what cichetti were. Okay, definitely not a tourist. And when I first started doing the cichetti tour, I was struggling to convince people to do it because people didn't understand what I was selling, what I was trying to bring them, yeah, it's a food tour, but what was this all about? So I worked a lot on educating people, on writing about and so on. It was me and just another big company we were doing, that's it. And back in 2008, you could still see around the old type of cichetti. So the spleen, you could see the liver, you can see the tripe, you can see maybe an egg with an anchovies, but we're talking about nearly, 2008, so it's 15 years ago more. And then obviously I started writing about it. Other tour operators caught on the idea, so they start offering the same kind of things I was doing. Many traditional osteria closed down and new one were born, but the new offer of a cichetti is not the old recipes. They are crostini, they are, it's not the same. Don't get me wrong. I said in an interview with for an Italian newspaper a while back, I don't mind innovation, and I don't mind them bringing out new things, because cooking is about that, is changing all the time. But it will be nice if the two things could go next to each other. So whenever you are proposing new stuff, you also present the traditional ones, and instead we are losing them slowly, but we're losing so many things. So it is a big revival. Yes, it is a big revival, not just in Venice.
Yeah, and there was an instrumental lady, Ada Catto.
Yes, my mentor.
Tell us a little bit of about who Ada Catto is, and I think she was maybe just a young girl or something when she arrived in.
Yeah, she was I think she was about 15 or something like that. She's from my area, from the countryside where I come from, and we're talking about many just. I think it was just after the war she came to Venice. And you have to remember, Venice during the war was hit by a bomb, and it was left as one of the poorest cities in Europe. People were starving. All of the Veneto people were fairly hungry, but particularly in Venice, just so you know, they were so hungry that at the beginning of the week, people will have to go and buy a smoked herring, hooked it on the ceiling. And then for the next 2 weeks, all they cooked was polenta. And for every meal, just to grab a little bit to get a flavor of it. Okay. So of course, you had the people from the countryside that, if you come from a family with about 6, 7, 10 brothers and sisters, whatever, people were starving. So they went to do all kinds of jobs. Ada was coming from the countryside, from a family in the countryside, from farmers with loads of children. And she had to go and work. I think she was about 14, 15. And she went to work for Osteria La Vedova, but back then was Osteria Cadoro. And just to wash up. She's supposed to have been only the washing up girl. But then obviously they started asking her to help in the kitchen. They realized that she was good at it. And as the years went by, she became the main cook. And what she did, she changed the way that cichetti were understood. So for many years, all the dishes, it would have been, as I was saying before, maybe an egg with an anchovy, a little bit of polenta with a cheese. She started to create dishes with artichokes, with everything that was available from the market that day, and to experiment a little bit. And it wasn't just about the cichetti, she's also with traditional dishes and so on. And so she she kind of changed the idea of the cichetti, and slowly everybody else started to copy alla vedova, and the rest is history, practically.
Okay, so let's start into maybe dividing the flavors. Let's talk about fish. And also the fish from the lagoon and the market in the Alto. So that's, I would assume, is the market every single day or certain days?
No, it's every single day, but Sundays and Mondays, because of course the fishermen don't go out and fish on the weekends. So you cannot find fish on a Monday morning, and on a Sunday is closed. It is mainly a very Alto market. You will find is divided in 2 areas. You have One area, the one under the arches, that is where you will find wild fish. So the fish that was caught in the open lagoon, okay, but wild. And then you have all of the other fishmongers that have a mix between the wild, but also the one that is raised in the lagoon, of course, but is raised, so it's a bit bigger quantity. Still, the majority of fish that you see on the stalls of the Rialto market or of the fishmongers of Venice generally is from the lagoon of Venice. That we are very lucky because it's got a lot of bounty. It's a very good lagoon with, we have sardines, we have anchovies, we got sea bass, sea breams, all different type of shellfish, crabs, clams, mussels, shrimps, you name it, we got it. Plus, obviously, we import also the fish from the other parts of the Adriatic. So there's, but saying that, everybody thinks that in Venice, people always been eating fish. It's a lie. Because actually in the 1800s, to eat fish identified you as a poor person, because rich people ate meat. Okay. We start having a big input of fish in the Venetian cuisine, in the imagination of people, from the 60s, when from the Adriatic coast of Jesolo, Eraclea, all the seaside resorts, the German tourists, they were coming from there, they were staying there on holiday, they were coming in Venice for day trips. They wanted to eat fish, because in their idea it was, well, you are on a sea, you got to have fish. That the Venetian cuisine in the restaurants went from offering meat dishes to offering just mainly fish dishes. So it's actually been driven
of tourism.
That's been driven also by tourism, but it's a bit sad, but that's it.
Talking about fish, you are mentioning the word mariegola, okay, from 1227. What was that?
So le mariegole actually are the books, okay, the law books, okay, for according to which trade you belong, you have to have, it's like a code of conduct, okay. The mariegola that I was talking about in the Rialto is the one that defines the size. Is you talking about the one that defines the sizes of the fishes?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So in the Rialto market, and this actually, if you think about it, is something that is still followed by the fishermen all over the world. You were only allowed to bring into the market fish of a certain size, because of course, if they were smaller, you were taking away the possibility of each fish to grow bigger or to have a family, whatever, and to create other fishes. So they were controlled. Yeah. And if you go to Rialto, you still see the sign with the sizes that it tells you the sizes they need to be.
Okay, so maybe we.
I hope I hope you meant that. Okay,
yes.
all right. Oh, because I wrote the book, but I don't remember what I wrote in the book.
No. It was curious. But now let's mention some of the fish-based cichetti. Bacala also seems to have a role, a spotlight. So I'm going to let you.
Okay, so I will start with the most traditional one, that is sardine sour. That is the most traditional Venetian recipe, the most Venetian fish, because it's sardine, and it is loved by all the Venetians. You will find in every single restaurant in Venice, okay? It's a fairly easy recipe also to replicate if you want to. So sour comes from savor in Venetian, that means flavor. And it was the way the Venetian used to preserve food, not just fish, but also meat and vegetables, okay? Basic recipe, you take whichever, well, let's talk about the sardines. You take the sardines, you clean them, you can take or not the bones out if you want. You can fillet them or not if you want to. You flour them and deep fry them, and you put them on a side. Then you take double the amount in weight of white onions, and you braise them very, very slowly with olive oil, white wine vinegar, and white wine. You do that for about an hour and a half until they caramelize, but without turning brown. This is very important, okay? And then you do layers. Ingredient onion, finish with a lot of onions, and you leave in the fridge for 48 hours. with what's happening with sardines, the onions and the vinegar draws out the greasiness and the fishiness of a dish and turns it into a very mild dish. This was used by the fishermen of boats because they suffer from scurvy and they need the vitamin C. The onion, the vitamin C they found in the onion, the vinegar killed the bacteria. Simple as that. And then the other typical dish is bacala. That is not salt cod. It is dry cod, stockfish. Goes back to the fact that at the end of the 1400s, a captain called Querini, he was a merchant captain that was stationed in Crete that belonged to Venice, was due to go to the British Channel to do business with Holland and Britain. But once he got there, he got caught in a storm, shipwrecked. Him and his crew, some of his crew, managed to grab onto some rafts, and then they were drawn by the currents all the way to the island of Rust, Lofoten in Norway, where they got rescued by the local people after a few days. They brought them back to the village, they fed them, they clothed them, everything they had, they shared with them, including the wives. So very happy sailors, as you can imagine. And what they did when he was there, the captain noticed the way that the local people used to preserve the fish. That is something still done only in Lofoten and nowhere else in the world. They catch a cod, put it on sticks, and expose it to the sun for 6 months until it becomes as hard as rock. Now, when the captain saw it, realized the opportunity for Venice, because it meant you had access to fish all the time, because in the Middle Ages, if you're now fishing, it didn't mean that you came back with fish. So brought it back to the city. Venetians at first were a bit like, oh, what is this? But then they realized the opportunity, and we developed more than 40 recipes with it. Now, bacala mantecato is actually a very long, tedious recipe. So you need to take, first of all, the slab of cod and soak it for at least 72 hours, changing the water very frequently, okay? Then you boil it. Once it's white, you drain it, you remove the skin, you remove the bones, and you beat it very hard, adding oil and a little bit of garlic. And you do that for at least 2 hours until it becomes a nice soft mousse. There is no milk, there is no mayonnaise, there is no cream, nothing else, no flour or nothing. But it's a delicious dish. On polenta is the top.
So yes, usually what happens is that, unfortunately, people travel to a lot of places and then they're presented with menus where sometimes it's hard to understand what the ingredients are going to be. And that happens also to us Italians. We go to a different region. So if you were to kind of mention, the top 5 things that because people might, recognize the word polpetta, okay? And there's tuna meatballs. Yeah. But some other things that people say, go ahead. And so we talk about the bacala mantecato. We talk about the sardine sour.
Okay, moscardino, assolutamente moscardino. Yeah.
Okay.
No, lo devo dire. Okay,
no, moscardino.
Moscardino is because every time I take people on tour, people go like, oh, when they try, they go, oh. So yeah, it's really good. So moscardino is actually a very small, tiny octopus that is typical of the Adriatic, and they're cooked usually when you find them on the menu. They're usually cooked in tomato sauce. So no ketchup. I'm talking about tomato sauce. Okay. Yeah, just I want to clarify. No spices or nothing. It's just plain. A nice tomato sauce, but it's very tender, and it's very, people think it's got weird flavor by the look of it, but when they go like, oh, it actually tastes nice. So moscardini, you'll find the peocci, of course, that is mussels.
That was the other one I was going to ask you.
Peocci. Oh gosh, you need to remind me that. Look, have mercy on me. I was just in the middle of writing another book, so at the moment, my cichetti book is long gone.
Okay, so peocci is mussels. Okay, very good. So let's move for the meat lovers. Okay. Yeah. So another word that obviously
polpette, of course. Okay, yeah. It's really funny because bovoeti, I have an argument with somebody the other day because I said, no, you put in the wrong section. Yeah. I said to them, we said to me, oh, you put in the meat, it should be a fish. And I said, well, no, it's not a fish, it's nails. No, I mean, I realize that is in the lagoon, but still is, is meat. So bovete is something that you find only in certain
I
season.
would
It's
love.
very hard to find. And unfortunately, very hard to find the cichetti places because few cichetti places do it. And it's just the snails. And we just cook them very quickly with a bit of parsley, a bit of garlic, and we're done with enough. It's like in France, you know, they're very tiny. They're not like the big snails that you have in France. They're very small. So to eat, you need like God knows how many kilos because they are so small, and you just there's so little out of it, you know.
I'm a big snail person, so we have a trusted lumacaio in Rome that my dad and I go to, and again, it's much harder to find these little ones. But when we do find them, as you said, we get quite a few kilos of them. Another word that I wouldn't know what it is figa veneziana.
Okay, so it's a fegato alla veneziana, that is liver Venetian style. That is a famous Venice, Veneto, no, Veneziana, no, so it's Venetian liver. That is made simply by you cook it very quickly, very fast. We cover with a lot of onions. And again, this was one of the favorite dishes for the same reason. The liver gives you iron, the onions add the vitamin C. I mean, Venetian cuisine, most of Italian cuisine, but even more so maybe Venetian cuisine, because they had this problem. The Venetians didn't have that many fruits and vegetables to start with. You know, they were only living from what was available in the lagoon. So a certain type of fish and some fruits and vegetables. So at the end, at the beginning, wasn't that much. So they had to find ways to supplement their diet. And you do it by combining, you know, what you have in different ways. And, you know, liver and
well, when I do see you, definitely I'm a big nervetti person.
You will, it will be so hard to find them again, because this is a tendons, okay? And used to be one thing.
Just for me, not my husband.
Yeah,
and his portion too.
It's actually very, as you say, an acquired taste because they're very crunchy. And few now of the bacari unfortunately do it. But this used to be one of the main cichetti that you will find. You still find them in some supermarkets, so they will sell them in the delicatessen. They do sell them,
So in order to, and this is indeed the most comprehensive, only
and in English, from August on Amazon.
So you also divided the second half of the book in itineraries. But I was wondering how, you know, how many places did you have to try, and maybe some didn't make into the book because after all you have to cut off. So how was the experience like? So tell us a little bit about your research.
Okay, you need to ask my weighing scale. Okay, it was hard. I put on. You have got no idea how much weight I put on since then that I haven't managed to shed. Now, okay, so it wasn't that hard because, of course, this book, I don't know if you want.
It was a work in progress, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, well, the story of this book is a bit particular because I actually started writing the book in 2008, 2010, when I first met Ada. But she started giving me the recipes, and I wanted to write a book about her recipes, okay, not just about the cichetti, but because she's a cook, so she had a lot of things. So I started writing them down, started to interview her and so on, and it was there. And then a few years back, I think it was about 2017, 2018, I found an agent in England who said to me, oh, I'm pretty sure you can, you know, publish in England. Turns out the 17, 18 was a period where publishing was going down the drain. And many publishers were interested, but they said to me, it's not the right time because, you know, it's a very niche kind of book. And so I thought, okay, forget about it. It'll never be written. And I put it on the side. Then in 2021, I was interviewing a local journalist that she's very famous all over Italy. She wrote a book about the Fenice theater. And while I was talking with her, I mentioned, oh yeah, I wrote a book on cichetti. You know, I sit in there. She says, oh, my publisher asked me to write a book on cichetti. So my face went like, oh, okay. She's a journalist. She just published one. Yeah, forget. Betsy, might as well forget all about it. And she said to me, I don't really want to do it. shall I mention your name? And I went like, okay. But really like, you know, when you are like, it's never
Sure,
going to happen.
hopeless, kind of.
It's never going to happen. So she left, and half an hour later, she calls me, says he wants to speak to you. I said, okay. So he calls me and he says, when can I see you? And I go laughing, tomorrow. And he says, what time? And I went like, okay. So I went there, we met, and I thought, okay, I'm not going to waste your time. I'm going to tell you what I want for my book. If it's what you want, we carry on talking. Otherwise, I'll just go, let's pretend I've never been here. So I tell him what I wanted from my book. He looks at me, says, this is exactly what I wanted and more. Okay, I said, I got one condition, the photographer, I get to choose it. At which he said to me, that could be a problem because photographer costs a lot of money. At which I said, don't worry, because this photographer costs a lot of money, but he owes me a big favor. So
Rocco Paladino,
yeah,
let's mention
Rocco.
his name.
Because what's happening, Rocco, we met in 2010, and he's the first person ever that took professional photos of me and my cooking partner. And he was at the beginning, we were at the beginning. And I remember we became friends, and I remember saying to him, when I become famous and when I write my first book, you're going to be my photographer. Okay. And he just said, yes. So
wonderful.
When the publisher said to me to go ahead with the book, I called him and says, do you remember in 2010? He says, yeah. Well, I got the book, really, but you will not get a penny. He said, yeah, all right, okay. So that's not true about the penny.
He will eat. He will be very happy to eat pictures. I mean, the subjects of the picture, he says.
Oh my God, we spent 3 days, me and him, going around and thing. So most of the Osteria, I already had them. So it was interesting because obviously then the editor said to me, when can you have a book ready? We're in the middle of a pandemic. And I said to him, look, I know which places I want to put down. The problem is, I don't know if they're going to open ever again.
Yeah.
So he said to me, okay, let's wait for spring 2022. Give me the book by the 31st of January, 2022. 1st of January 2022, the book still hasn't been written. I mean, I had the recipe, but all of the itinerary, all of the history part
behind it,
and the pictures, nothing done. So we actually I managed to hand over everything by the 28th. So I was quite proud of myself. It's true. I actually didn't put all the Osteria that I could have put in, and that was by choice. Because speaking with the editor, speaking with a photographer, and also with a lot of people that, you know, I got them to test with me and whatever. I didn't want it to be just a guidebook about going from A to B and so on. And I didn't want to put the Osteria just because they are known or just because they do the thing. It had to be a combination of high quality, good price, but also atmosphere.
Yeah, the experience.
So there are some Osteria that are very famous all over Venice that didn't make the cut. And it's not because, it's just because I know, I saw. For me, I didn't want it to be. And there were people that are new. In fact, some people said to me, yeah, but that's only 1 month old. Yeah, but I know the owner. I know what he worked before. I know how he worked before.
Yes.
And 2 years on now, they totally were, I was totally right, because they proved to be the way they're supposed to be. So
the best way to get in touch with you and to plan a cichetti tour is, first of all, book early, because Monica, she's a busy lady. She's a busy lady. And so a minimum of 2 individuals,
minimum 2, maximum 8. My ideal 4. If I can have 4, I'm a very happy lady, because I don't like big numbers.
So how many stops do you typically
we usually, my tours are lazy, because I know there's people out there that do the pub crawls. They do pub crawls. They go like 5, 6 in 2 hours. Mine are 3-hour tours, and usually it's 2 places, because I like for people to sit down, we talk, I tell them the story, get them to eat a lot, get them to eat, drink even more. And for me, it's not about getting drunk. I want people to learn, because then I want people to go to other places, not necessarily those that we've been, but to other places in Venice, and know how to order and what to order.
Yes.
So yeah, they're very, as I said, well, as usually people say to me that when they come with me, it's like if they went around with just a friend. That's what I want for my tours.
And indeed, that's the experience. It makes you feel that you are part of like one of the locals for those 2 or 3 hours. So
well, I'll tell you what, just a quick, if I can, what happened
Sure.
actually yesterday during the tour. So there is this couple, sorry, and we go to my first stop. And I'm just sitting there explaining things, and all of a sudden one of the waiters comes to me and says, Monica, sorry to disturb you, but there's somebody outside that would like to talk to you. And I thought, okay. So I walk out, and there is this group of Italians, by the way. They look at me, says, you're Monica? Yes. And they got my book in their hand. And they said, oh, I said, you got my book? Yeah. So, oh, okay. Do you want me to autograph it? So autograph it. Okay. So are you happy? Oh, yeah. We done most of the places you told us to go. We did it. We're very happy. Okay, good. And I'll say goodbye. I move with my clients to the next place. We're sitting there, carry on with our tour. The groups arrive again. And they said, we're doing everything you told us to do. And we end up actually going for drinks together after with my fan club. And the people in the tour were so happy because they said, we feel part of being like we are part of Venice, of a Venetian,
Yes.
the real Venetians. It's not like being a tourist. It's like we're going out with your friends. And that's what me, that's my tours are like that. So if you're looking for pub crawls, that's not me, sorry.
Okay, yeah, if you want to be a local, then absolutely get hold of Monica Cesarato. And unfortunately, with this, our time together is up. Il Big Ben ha detto stop. And it's time for us to say arrivederci and alla prossima. We want to thank you for tuning in to the program. If you have any questions or comments, or if you have any travel topics you would like us to address, please contact us at theitalianradiohour@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. And remember, if you or any of your family and friends have missed a prior episode or would like to listen to this episode again, please visit our website at www.istitutomonditaliano.org and click on the Italian Radio Hour tab. You can also subscribe to the Italian Radio Hour on YouTube or where you catch your favorite podcasts. We would like to thank our guest, Monica Cesarato. I can't wait to see you in Venice in about a month. Our sponsor is Istituto Mondo Italiano, la prima espressione, la boara for the music. Until next time, alla prossima. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.